Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Rolewise Podcast, your show where we talk about RPG stuff. Today, the stuff that we're going to be tackling is going to be along the lines of plot wreckers, or specifically the concept of abilities, skills, things that your players can do in game, or that you as the DM can give them that can make your life very interesting. We may veer off into obviously tangential topics, but plot wreckers is always kind of an interesting conversation because I believe it's fairly common. Usually, the players will either stump you as a GM, make you end a session short, or you may give them something, and then one of the really clever players goes, "Oh, well, this is an interesting way to use this." And you're like, "Oh,
Well, I mean, players will try and figure out a way to wreck the plot anyways, or deviate from the plot as much as possible. This is
hmm
more like giving what caused us to talk about this is there's a quote in not a quote, it's a advice in the Over the Edge 3 book,
hmm
which is a game that I absolutely love. And it's also a game where you can kind of just do whatever you want. Like you just make up the character. And one of the things it suggests is don't do any plot wreckers, which is like wishes, time travel, mind control, um,
invulnerability."
vulnerability, telling invulnerability they don't mention, but they're more things
hmm
like immunity to violence isn't something that I think that they consider a plot wrecker. It's more like things that'll let you see behind the fabric of the story. Like
hmm
things that'll if you're reading someone's mind, being able to be like, oh, I know the answer to mystery X because now I found the right guy to
hmm
mind control, or mind control being able to do the same thing to that guy and get whatever you want out of him. Wishes would be a good one in D&D, although wishes now have a long track record of people like GMs being aware of them so that they
hmm
the player's language against them a lot of times. um
It's pretty much like your requirement as a DM is that if your player if you get to the point where your player can learn or can acquire some sort of wish spell, then you're basically setting yourself up for a contest of wills to see
right,
who.
you're trying to monkey paw that shit as much as possible. You're trying to be like, what did you say exactly?
Okay, and I want you to write this down. It was kind of like when we were doing that Dragonbane game, and I was just like, "Now you made an oath to the universe. I need you to write down that oath exactly,
Right, exactly.
so
um
I know exactly how you defined what your pursuant goal is. That you, if you deviate from, you
Exactly.
feel
So
terrible."
that's kind of where this inspiration came from to talk about it during this. Is like I just kind of want to talk about like what would you allow as far as plot records. Like D&D has a lot of them technically.
hmm
Like a lot of the higher level spells are just batshit crazy. Like they're a whole like you could do a whole campaign about somebody getting a wish spell.
Mhm. Well, yeah, I
Um,
mean, and or you could end a campaign with that being, like, one of the ultimate things that happens, and then you just
oh,
like
it could end a campaign for sure, whether you planned on it or not.
it's true. I'm not gonna lie. But I did, before we got into this really deep, because obviously that's the goal is to plumb the depths of plot wrecking devices. But I was actually, as I was looking around on this, I found this thing, and tell me if you've heard about this or not. I found this thing called the Henderson scale of plot derailment.
I've never seen that. No.
So apparently, this is from the boards of 4chan, because apparently there is a thing that
Oh, where no human being should really go.
no, and it had made its way over to Reddit somehow, but I went over to something called 1D6chan. I don't know what the hell that is, but
It's a tabletop role playing side of it. Yeah.
yeah, so originating from a suggestion in this thread, and it takes you to some hole in the wall. The Henderson scale of plot derailment is a handy scale used to determine just how much any action has derailed the plot of an RPG. These actions are almost always caused by either that guy or that guy to aggravate a bad GM. And that guy or this guy are, tropes.
Hmm.
Very rarely, it's a noble last action by a supremely selfless neckbeard to stop a disaster before it starts. I'm just quoting this from the site. The scale was made in the namesake of Old Man Henderson, so that he may be remembered as one of the greatest lol awesome derailers of all time. Sounds like a wonderful person to play with. It- and it
Well, I'll have to
apparently,
go check that out.
yeah. It's so basically there is so the scale goes from -9 imaginary, -9 Hendersons, all the way to great two or greater Hendersons. So like a -9 Henderson, for example, is like the action undertaken has solved every problem in the game's universe for every living and non-living being in existence. Um, Meaning that whatever the action that they did was so stupendous that it just they won.
Right.
They just won.
Yep.
Um, whereas the -2 Hendersons is the action has somehow set in motion a chain of events that'll fix every problem previously thought of by the GM for all future campaigns, so much that not even that guy can screw it up. But then if you go on the flip side, you actually go to the two, like the, one full Henderson, which is the still in the basic Henderson scale. The action undertaken has effectively caused total plot derailment. The old plot is gone forever and a new one needs to be made from scratch. Whereas if you go past one Henderson, you actually reach the excessive Henderson scale. And at at two or greater Hendersons, let's say, because there's chunks up until that, it's near mythic levels, unrepresentable by numbers in this or any scale. The action undertaken has undergone all steps above, easily, except possibly the last one. Either way, the game is now somehow refuses to go away and die. Maybe the GM initiated the scratch, but the game remains in some form screwing with the players. Only one person to our knowledge has managed to actually ever do it. And like for example, like at a point 1.75 Henderson, the action undertaken has killed the whole party with everyone involved in the plot. It has ruined the game and likely caused the GM to begin seizing, attempt to strangle the perpetrator, laughing uncontrollably, or just sit there in shock. Have you ever heard that at all?
I have never heard that. No,
It's pretty funny though.
that is pretty funny.
I had to laugh
That
because
is
I
pretty
was like,
funny.
because you're like, oh, this makes sense to me that there's like somebody has quantified this to some degree of
Yeah,
like,
somebody sat down and quantified it that much. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
like
pretty amazing.
I have to say, good job, role players, good job, because
Good
that is, I
job.
mean, even though the source is suspect, I don't spend any time in the 4chan
The
forum,
Chans.
but I do have to say that what came out of it seems to be a rather comical, if not lighthearted.
There are some good things that come out of there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of bad things though, but that's interesting.
Yeah, and
Um,
so I mean, I'll probably post it in the description notes if anybody wants to take a look at this. It's just comical because you're
but I
probably
mean,
once you can go back in time and start looking at some of the old games you've ran, you can probably be like, "Yep, that was a .75 Henderson."
well, and most of that is plot derailment with like no powers, really. That's
Mhm.
just the power of player decision making.
It is. And so they talk about like, um, what did they say? Like there was one that was like at 1.25 Henderson's a special notch on the Henderson scale that is achieved under certain conditions and specific reaction by the DM. The action undertaken has derailed the entire plot, and rather than making a new plot, the GM has announced that rocks fall, everyone dies.
I felt like that before. Well, it's like that Brendan Lee, what's his name? Brendan
Mulligan.
Lee Mulligan story where he talks about the wedding that they kidnapped the bride from because she's not into it, and he's like, that wasn't the story that I planned on telling at all, but I had to like that's a one right there. Like the
Yeah,
old story is gone.
that is one full Henderson. It's
The new
easily,
story, there is a new story that has been birthed upon the inception of this new story that the players have decided that they're being part of.
and I've just tossed away the hours of preparation for the game, including all of the dwarven houses that he would maybe had to
Yeah.
learn and memorize and whatever.
So that's where the question of like what, like if you have like should players have plot wrecking abilities, like some of the ones that we talked about, or
Mhm.
what do you do if you make a whoopsie as a GM and like you're like, oh, I gave him a ring of wishes, now he has unlimited wishes, what am I going to do about it now, besides the age old
Rocks fall, everybody dies.
the rocks fall, everybody dies, or bandits steal all your stuff in your sleep, or you get eaten by paralytic centipedes that don't actually do any damage, like those types of things.
Well, it's interesting because I actually, I was thinking about this, when you suggested that we talk about this today, just to kind of like get into my headspace and be like, am I the type of DM that would be like, okay, I want to play a high fantasy game and all these kind of plot records are just off the table? And I would said, probably not, right? If we get to that point where something like this presents itself as part of the story that could make the story interesting, I would say sure, let give the players a wish, see what happens, like, and of course treat everything with constraints. Like if there was ever a situation in which a player got a ring of wishes, it wouldn't be a ring of like you know, it wouldn't just be the reality stone from Marvel. It would be a ring of one wish, two wish, three wishes, like it used to be in the old editions, right?
Yeah.
So you would get a wish or possibly three if I was like really wanted to torture myself. Because one wish isn't already enough. And three
Oh,
wishes.
yeah. Yeah. Mm. Well, like I said, that's your campaign. That's your campaign now, is
Mhm,
whatever these wishes are. And I guess it's different. And like, it's interesting that the Edge presents it this way, because basically, like, in Over the Edge, if you make one of these abilities, like if you say, I can mind read, like,
mhm,
basically at will, like, one, it's an at will ability, and and two, it relates, everything that they do comes from that.
mhm.
Like, so it's a very specific game that I think it is, but I still think it's interesting to see how to handle plot linkers, like not having it in Over the Edge, basically, like, because you can do anything with it, the game's so
Mhm.
open narratively. It would be like, well, it would be like in Discworld, if, like the Discworld which you played recently, if you just had a line that said you can do anything and everything.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, I can tie this to anything that I want, and if I can make a pun about it, I can just succeed all the
Like
time.
I get 12. I get quadruple
Yeah,
dice.
yeah.
Yeah, maybe. And I think that mechanically that's going to be where you have to kind of weigh that in because in like Over the Edge being such a narrative game, there isn't really a mechanical way to rein the players in. So to use
Correct.
another one of your points, like if you went to mind control, I really feel like mind control or reading minds or something like that. I mean, I don't feel like that's too bad. But in a game like Over the Edge, where there's very little to say, like, oh, they might get a die, you might have to roll one time to just like totally break
Control
the
them
game.
forever. Yeah, control
Yeah,
them
like
forever.
like okay, that's
Yeah.
one thing. Whereas like in D&D, there may be either a duration component, like you can't do that
Right.
forever. You know, there might be a defense component that the other person has. You know, they might be able to limit what you can access, what you can't access. You know, so there may be some things like you might be able to like go, oh, well, you do access his brain and you get his thoughts, but they're not words, they're images. You might
Right.
be able, you know what I'm saying? You can kind of
Yeah.
like change it up a little bit, and you might even be able to do some of that in like Over the Edge. But I feel like mechanically, you can at
It would be
least
hard in a narrative.
challenge the.
Yeah, it would be hard in a narrative game like Over the Edge, where there's
Mhm.
so much of the narrative control is on the players. If they designed a character like that, it could easily wreck a
Oh yeah,
game.
well,
Whereas
and
D&D, like you said, D&D has mechanics behind some of the things
mhm.
that it presents, like the wish spells and all that. And I think, like, as far as like mind control, like there's also social elements that happen in D&D too, where it's like,
Mhm.
if you're seen mind controlling a bunch of people, like that's probably a decisively evil act if you're just mind controlling a whole town or
Yeah.
whatever. And there's even, that sort of thing. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think, but they're interesting because I do think that as the DM, if you really had a destination in mind and you wanted them to get there, these I don't know if you. I mean, I'd have to
So
say you'd have to be adaptable to the idea that introducing these could change your end game.
So what do you think would be a plot wrecker for you? One that where you were like, that maybe you can't think of one off the top of your head, but what's something that you think you could introduce that would wreck a game for you? Just make you like not.
Players, I mean, really,
it's
like I
not
don't need wishes. I just need you guys to join the table and see what happens.
it's not an ability you give anybody. It's just who you give it to. Um
Yeah.
yeah, because like I've heard people say like the deck of many things, the thing that they could, but I
Mhm.
think that's just that's just chaos. Like that's
It's
just
just it's
again,
chaos
because
and
I think
unpredictable.
that's the thing in a D&D game that just becomes the plot, I guess. Um,
Maybe. Well, and I think that there are certain things that like the deck of many things, or like I think back in the day, if you like got hit with a prismatic spray, like one of them was like you could be sent to another dimension or something like that, or
well,
turned to
yeah, but I
stone.
think you were
You know,
technically
like
dead then. But I mean, that was just you were technically dead at that point, I think.
Yeah, I mean, but I think that those kind of things. Oh, well, now your plot is to get back one of your fellow PCs. They make a character to help get themselves back, I guess. I mean,
Right.
yeah. So it could adjust the plot, and I think that's about that adaptable plot. Because in the weird part about it is in those cases, those side adventures, they can still lead up to your ultimate, decisive conclusion. They just happen to be side quests, for lack of a better term, until until they resolve those, then they go, okay, well, now we can, if we have the motivation to go back and we have the ability to loop this in, you can bring it all back to the end of it, you
Yeah,
know.
I guess I think in this discussion, what I've thought of is really the only time something, especially for somebody who's been GMing for a long time and knows tricks and stuff like that, and has that flexibility like part of their brain. I guess the only time plot records become a concern is when a player can wrest total narrative control out
Mhm.
of the GM's hands, which is what could happen in an over the edge game with this particular thing. Like they could just, I'm making up the story now, you're not anymore.
Well, and then there are also there's more to it than that as well. Because if, like, for example, if you have that, I'm going to introduce the villain early, so you can have a tangible thing for them to see and set as their goal to overcome, and then they go, oh, I mind control him, he's now our slave, and you go, "Er."
Right. Okay. So how would you how would you handle that in a game?
Well,
Because that could technically happen in any game that has that sort of ability.
well, there's a few ways that you could do it. You could be cheesy and be like, "Oh, that's just in a simulacrum or something like that," and that would be very unsatisfying. But at the same time, it's like, well, what do you expect? You're going to have to expect the DM is going to, like, rock paper scissors you a
Something.
little bit on
Yeah.
some of these things. You could be like, well, you thought he was the big bad, but I guess I'm going to have to reveal the bigger, badder bad early, because he's just like, oh, you've controlled me by whatever, but beware that other guy that's right behind me.
Or it's worked on everybody, but it hasn't worked on this person.
Yeah, and
Uh,
maybe you don't know why.
I mean,
You can introduce that.
that was the plot twist in what Dune, the second episode of Dune. Have you watched Dune Prophecy, the second one yet?
Hmm.
Where she tries to use the voice on the guy. I mean,
Spoilers.
spoilers. Sorry.
So if you're watching Dune Prophecy and you don't want to hear spoilers, go ahead 3 minutes and we'll be but
Well,
yeah, no,
Brent just said it. You might want to put that. I'll put that in the notes that there's a slight Dune spoiler in there.
you were bad about this, but yeah, no, you're
I was
absolutely
bad
right.
about this.
Like, I mean, that, and of course, that moment where you're like, wait, was it working? Was
Right.
it not working? Did he just do
Did he just ape
theatrical?
that? Yeah.
Yeah, did he just go, "Oh, just kidding?" And you're like, that guy's really fucking cool. I like how they're playing Dune Prophecy out. I'm enjoying it so far.
Yeah, it's good. So sorry about that, everybody.
Yeah, well, it's you knew it was gonna happen or something.
It was definitely weird.
It was. I was like, well, IMDb did say he was in more than 2 episodes.
It's true. And this will be out later, so they'll probably, anybody who's interested will probably have watched it already. So I feel alleviated of a little guilt.
Yeah, but I mean, but there are ways to do it, and that's where that adaptability comes through. But you have to make it so it's not just GM fiat, right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah, you have to make it feel organic to the situation, not just
because it's funny, because if they do get that ability for whatever reason, and then you just don't give an organic reason as to why they would not be impacted by your ability or something like that, then it's a weird feel bads moment for a
100%.
situation that you created somehow. Like, it's just like, well, why would you even give me this ability if I couldn't use it when it mattered? Like,
Yeah, and I guess in one of the things that TM that like Dungeons and Dragons and games where like you have spells that do this or
Mhm,
items that do this is when they're going to have them.
mhm,
So you can plan for it a little bit better.
yeah.
And you can say that about Over the Edge too, but like they're just too expansive. Like it's just too much.
Well, and I think, to bring it up in a narrative game again, I think that there's just, I think that you have to choose things that are interesting narratively, and I'm not sure I feel like narratively mind control, unless you want to have a super specific, like maybe even a high powered game where you guys are all very powerful individuals that have important aspects that they can do. Like, I mean, imagine playing like a superheroes game and one person was the empath, and one person was the,
Right.
like, you had, I mean, if
Well,
you had
right.
that kind of game, then you wouldn't really be worried about plot records, because you would be having to define the plot as they went, because they would literally be warping.
Well, but
I don't know.
even in superhero games, usually they have some sort of limits to the power. Like you can
Mhm.
mind control one person at a time, or you have to do it in a specific way.
Yeah.
It's just to limit that sort of like
Mhm.
and potentially in other games, like I said, the more narrative games, like you might not have those sort of limitations on your character.
Yeah.
And if you do try to like force them on a character, like you said, it's a feels bad sort of thing.
It's
So
it's like an unforced error for the GM, really, when you do it and you don't have an escape plan somehow baked into it that feels right. Like, and I have been in those kind of games where, the GM is just like, they've tried to hide it mysteriously, be like, oh, you rolled a natural 20 on your roll that I just kind of made you arbitrarily do to because you weren't going to succeed, and then you got it, and now
I have to plan around a whole game around this now.
yeah, I have
Yeah.
to now deal with this, and it's just like, he deflects your blow. Well, why the fuck do you make me roll? Just make it cinematic, dude. Just like I
Yeah.
throw my knife, whoop, ding. He blocks it with his cloak, and he laughs maniacally, saying, "Ha ha ha! You're level one,
Disappears or
noob."
whatever. Yeah, or disappears.
But yeah, before your knife hits him, he turns into a flurry of bats and vanishes into the night. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like something, but like you go, oh, I rolled a 20, and he goes, JK, LOL.
JK, LOL, BRB.
Like that just doesn't work in my opinion. Yeah, because I mean honestly, and the funny thing is that I don't think I've ever really had the opportunity in a D&D game to play with too many of these. When I was younger, we played with the deck of many things. We did games that included like, is it the bag of beans? Is that like the other one that's kind of just weird shit that
Yeah,
happens?
you pull things out. Yeah, you put the pieces
That
around
one,
that stuff.
and they were kind of fun, chaotic things to just kind of do on a Saturday night. Those kind of things. They weren't very serious though. But I've never really played a serious game that has culminated in one of these like super abilities to put on Cerebro or have
Right.
a
Wait,
reality altering wish. That's what I meant to say.
yeah, I've never really had that either. But again, Over the Edge though is a game that's pretty easy to break if you're
Mhm.
A, clever, or B, want to really bad. Like that's why it says that, is because you could definitely break the game
Oh
over.
yeah.
Like you could just make a character that's willfully godlike. But like I've
So
never really had that either, and that's one of the reasons why I felt it was interesting to talk about, is because I just haven't. Like, do GMs ever give somebody an ability and be like, well, I know that happens, or I've read
mhm.
stories where people are like, oh shit, I never should have, oh, that was a mistake, I shouldn't have given that or let that
Yeah.
happen.
Well, and
But
that's definitely
I've never really run into that, because I guess it's not that I plan for it, it's just that wrecking my plot is like, a lot of the plots that I write are tailored to the players and the game that
Mhm.
we're playing. So I usually have a pretty easy way to pivot, a pretty easy way to out to pivot.
Mhm.
So I think plot wreckers depends on the game.
True.
Really.
Well, and I mean, out of curiosity, this is something that is interesting about it is that, like, for me as a player, like, mind control sounds powerful, but it doesn't sound interesting to me as much
Right.
as
There's that
like
too.
there are. I mean, it like, oh, I can control anyone I talk to. Okay,
Well,
to
it's like
what end? Like,
it's like the old adage, I could play can I play Superman? Well, yeah, but why would you want to play Superman?
mhm.
Like, you can do anything and you're better than everybody else. Like, what? I mean, there's people that would, I think,
Oh,
want to
I
play
think
that
so.
character, and they might be able to make it interesting, but I think you're just gonna get bored eventually.
Well, yeah, and I mean everybody, I think that character that you roll that has good stats or whatever. If you're in a system that has good stats, that isn't what makes you want to play the character, right? The
Right.
stuff that makes you want to play that character are the more kind of almost in like unsubstantial, like the things that are just behind the character. The story makes you want to play it. Their tale makes you want to play it.
Mhm.
Like how attached are you to the type of player this is? Because I mean, and there are people that definitely like that wargaming component of games.
Mhm.
Where they're like, I'm attached to this character because I do big numbers of damage. And I'm
Right.
every Saturday we get together. I'm ready for my 2 fights because I know that's our
Yeah.
4 hours is 2 fights. Like and that's if you're into that, I think you might find that somebody would maybe pursue these type of superpowers more frequently, because it would
Mhm.
be advantageous to them from like a power gaming standpoint.
Right, from their standpoint of what they want out of
Mhm,
the game. And I think that's another thing about the more narrative games like Over the Edge, where the question is okay, you want this really fancy power, but what narratively makes it interesting for you? Like
mhm,
what do you think? There's a quote that a friend of mine said once when we were playing one of these narrative games, and he said, "Yeah, you can make a character that's super good at combat, but the game's not going to be fun for you because he's not going to be good at anything else.
mhm,
Like when you're going to be talking a lot, sometimes that's not the like when you're role playing a lot. Sometimes just being good at hitting things isn't the best option.
mhm.
Um,
Yeah. So
so
it is an interesting dynamic to have to kind of work through as a GM to kind of because ultimately as the GM, like, and this is where I think you can run into more trouble in games that tend to be more randomized. And I think OSR comes to mind when it comes to like how do you get, because you could easily get a plot wrecking thing accidentally introduced to your
Mhm.
game because of loot tables and
Yep.
a random, random type deals where the you might accidentally maybe something that's a part of the environment. Oh, they found a 2,000-year-old pool of acid that does 8d6 damage the instant you touch it, and one of their players goes, "I just became an acid farmer" or something, and you're like, "Wait,"
What? What?
you know what I'm saying? Like all of a sudden,
My experience with that stuff is a plot record in that the players decide to open a tavern or something, or run a theater. I think was the other one.
well,
Well, we own this theater now, and we need to get ticket sales up. And I'm like, what? What have I
see,
done to this game?
See, and I feel like sometimes that off the cuff stuff is almost more dangerous than making players too powerful because of a
Oh,
certain
100%.
because it's like, I mean, I don't even remember what it was, but like one of the most fleshed out NPCs I had in one of our recent D&D games when we played was like some random merchant that one of you wanted to go back to over and over and over again. So I was like, wait, how many times have we talked to this one merchant out of every NPC that we've had to do? You remember that one?
I'm trying to remember. No, because I don't think it was me.
No, it was Jeff, and he was talking with that dwarven merchant in Waterdeep, and it was like every time because you guys were playing
Oh,
part of the Fandelver, and it was like every time
yeah.
you guys went there, you guys sought him out, and like I was like,
Yeah, that wasn't me. That's why I don't remember. I remember that happening now. Yeah.
but I was like, okay, well that I mean that's interesting, but that's the kind of stuff that I feel derails your plot more often than not is when you kind of just have on a
It
whim
does.
you create a detail that you just have to now like.
It doesn't matter if the players can read your mind, but it does matter if they get a theater and then they want to be playwrights all of a sudden.
What was the what? And it's just weird because it's like if you and this is why that goal book was so interesting. Is just like if your players don't have set goals and they start creating goals in the middle of your game that don't align with your plot.
Right. Well, the whole point of that was not to have a plot. Basically, they were like, "Don't have a plot. Just do what the players just
Just
make the players make the plots and just do that."
yeah, just do you are like, oh, sounds good. You want a dungeon? Okay, dungeon. Okay, you want
Exactly.
dragon's teeth because you need it for spells. Okay, dragon's teeth. What else
Yep,
do you need?
exactly. Which is yeah, and I guess that's my point. Kind of with the about plot records is that if you GM for a while, you know how to kind of pivot towards those goals. Unless they
Mm.
like just don't want to play your game. Like really, that's what it feels like sometimes when they're like, "We have a bar we need to run," and you're just like, "You guys just don't really want to play this game, do you? You guys just want to play this other game that you guys made up."
Well, and I believe that's two full Hendersons again. I mean,
Right, and then what? And
obviously,
then what do you do? Just try and wait until it's too boring for them? Like start start looking up business plans for running a bar, and then now we're doing sim bartender. That's what we're doing. It's a slow night at the bar. What do you do to help business?
well, I stand in the street and I point out that we have the best ale in town, like a town crier. Roll your performance check. Oh, you got a 2. Well, it's not a busy.
You're bad at this, obviously.
Practice makes perfect. Right now, you just sound like a like a yowling cat. You know.
I told you that happened in a Shadowrun game to me, right?
Yeah,
Like the Shadowrunners became
drug dealers, didn't they?
recreational narcotic dealers. Yes, like, and I was like, I can't. I don't think we can play this game, guys. I'm not here for sim drug dealer.
I wasn't prepared for this.
Yeah, I was just like, so I guess I have experienced a full Henderson.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny though because like I had a situation where obviously well, and this is one of those things where it's like if you're not given a lot of direction in the beginning, and I feel like it always happens in the beginning more than it happens in the middle or the end because it's always like in the beginning you may not be as clear as to what you should be doing. And so like I remember one time we were like not exactly clear how we should advance and I'm like, well, we don't have any money, so we need to get jobs or something. So
Right.
and it's like, well, I have a strong back. I go down to the docks and see if they need help unloading boats, like what's a dock worker pay? Like 1 copper a day, like just enough to barely sustain themselves kind of thing. And I'm like, if we pool our resources, we can get a single room we can share.
Well, or it's like this game that I played with these two guys where they had a hookah store, and they're like, "Why are we doing Shadowruns, and why aren't we trying to make this hookah store a success?" And I was like,
That
"No,
hookah
You are terrible at running the hookah store, and you need to do shadow runs to keep the business going.
You don't know, but what if I take an online class about advertising?
Yeah, exactly.
The reason I know about this is because I was one of those people running the hookah store. And we did pretty good. I mean,
You did, actually. It was a fun game too.
It was fun while it lasted. I have to say though, it was hilarious when, like, rolling the random dice about, like, do we have customers while we wait for shadow runs? It was like, oh, you sell one of your most expensive hookahs. I was like, shadow runs hookahs.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know how I get myself in these situations where my players are seriously debating retail over the fun adventures that I have planned.
No, it's, again, introduce players. You don't need to introduce anything else. I mean, you could drop a ring of wishes in front of them, and if they solve a problem, they can get it. And really, the players would be like, "Oh, that sounds really hard. Let's let's go to the town and see what happens when just we step into the town."
Right. I guess that, yeah, plot wreckers. The only real plot wreckers are the friends that we made along the way.
That's true. That's true. So, I mean, I guess, obviously this is the kind of fun conversation we like having. Today it was inspired by something that Brent had read. Just to kind of give it, a seed sprouted into
Well,
a
yeah.
weird topic.
Well, yeah, because
And
no other books ever say that. They don't say, don't tell your players not to do this. Like, there's not
Mhm.
very many like role-playing books where it's like, don't let your players do this. And Over the Edge, that portion of Over the Edge does have that, where it's like, don't let them pick plot wreckers.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting because it's one of the only areas that I've ever read that. And I guess what it did for me is it made me consider, at least when I'm running a game, like, what do I think might, if I do something with the players, what's something that might just totally derail the game. And like you, at least in an ability standpoint, like you said, most of the time your players are going to be able to do that regardless of, they could be naked in loincloths and sticks, and they'll they'll somehow manage to tame the T-Rex and ride it into town.
Mhm.
So, which is totally against the plot that you had, but yeah. So
Yeah. No, but it's a good conversation. And so, if you guys have your favorite plot wreckers, and you want us to know about them, shoot them in the comments. Let us know what games, what hilarious hijinks you or your players have done to you, so that we can,
or
commiserate. And
yeah, or if you have any advice on how to handle plot wreckers, or how
yeah,
you've handled plot wreckers in the past, or what's a plot wrecker for you, let us know. We'd be interested to talk about it.
and
It's an interesting thing to me.
and number 3, if you can rate all your plot wreckers in Hendersons, that would be very helpful for us to understand this new scale of plot wrecking that we've discovered. Um, so yeah, so I think that's it. And of course, if you guys like these kind of conversations, feel free to like, subscribe, hit that alert bell. And the more you like, subscribe, and share, the bigger our community can be, so we can have really fun conversations in the comments. Let us know. And then, of course, if this community gets really big, we might even do different things, like take it offline, do a Discord or something like that.
Website, Discord, we have
Yeah, those kind of things. Yeah, we're kind of like hobbyists at this point. So,
but there are always future plans for things. So
Mhm.
you can also visit us on all of our socials, at Rolewise, on Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky, and all those places. Or you can email us directly at rollwiseguys@gmail.com. That's a lot of ats in there, so you ignore one of them, not the middle one. Probably ignore the one at the beginning. But anyways.
Do you have a final thing you'd like to send us off to the?
Yeah, thank you everybody for being here. We are making our march towards 500, so please,
Mhm.
like Mike said, like, share, subscribe,
Yeah.
throw us to other people, and as always, roll well, roll wise, and be safe out there, everybody.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.